moving from finance to sustainability is also a way to translate different world, right? So I think that has been my hybrid. I'm a hybrid person in a way. That's the way I feel, right? Hybridation is good, in the Greek mythology, you have what we call centaur. They are half human, half horses. And that's the way I feel,
Hello and welcome to the CSO Impact Podcast, where we talk to leaders in sustainability and we discuss how our work have a positive impact on the planet. Today, I have the extreme pleasure to welcome Carine de Boissezon. She is the Chief Impact Officer of EDF in France. And you might know her already because we had a recording of the CSO panel with her and Ulrike Shapiro, who's the CSO of Henkel, recently at Change Now. And it was so, we got such a great feedback, and I had such a pleasure to talk to you, Carine, that we wanted to have a whole podcast with you and learn more about you. So welcome to this episode of the CSO Impact Podcast. How are you today, Carine?
I'm very good, actually. I wanted to ask you, Harald, what kind of music actually do you think we should play today? Because that was the question I had yesterday in one of the other intervention I had, and it was about just transition. And it was the first time I was asked, what kind of music rings with a special engagement of CSR, and a lot of participants put a lot of music on the chat, and I thought it was very interesting in a way because you really think about the lyrics and you think, well, arts is a way to touch people on the subject, right? So my song was People Have the Power from Patti Smith. So that's the mood
cool.
I am on today. People have the power.
Oh, that's super cool. I think that's a really good question to just kind of, take us off. What comes to my mind is sort of, it never rains in California.
Wow.
Which, is in a way, we always saw it as positive, but maybe it gets a new connotation.
A new connotation, right? You're right, completely, yes. I agree with you.
But it's good it's almost like, I don't know, older people like me, we know Ally McBeal, and she always had a theme song, and it was great to grow up with these things.
It's an interesting coincidence as well, because this week also I was listening to a masterclass done by a sustainability teacher about post-truth and fake news. And the music there was a music as an opening of the masterclass, and it was the music about it was like a fun song after the president of the United States talk about the cat and the dogs in being eaten, Remember in Springfield?
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that there is a song about it, right?
Yeah.
And the song is like a Bob Marley song, and it's super funny, right? And the teacher put that song as an opening to the students to talk about the post-truth and the fake news. And I thought it was like super, super good. So two things with songs this week. So I think it's a way to think about making us think differently about how we touch people, right?
This is so, let's say, how do you say, apropos, because in my last newsletter, we have a monthly newsletter going out, and I actually touched upon also, with all the bad news, where is good news? Are we even on a wait for desirable futures? And I said, well, let's look at culture and let's look at other things. Well, we have a new pope. That sort of, let's say culture, if it's not religion and spirit, it has a cultural meaning to at least 1.4 billion people, if not more. And then there's the Venice Biennale. So that's a cultural shift also dealing with intelligence and climate change. We are in Cannes, obviously. There's a Cannes Film Festival these weeks in May. So culture has a big influence on us. And maybe this is a way to, at some point, you don't want to see the news. So where else can you go? Music, film, architecture, and so on, culture. Thank you for that. And I know France is very big on this. So thank you for the reminder. Germany sometimes is very
And you know, it was
Very
one of the mention I did during my intervention in Change Now as well, because at EDF we are very lucky that we have actually an art gallery to ourselves that we use actually for some education. And we are doing one these days. So if you come to Paris, Harald, it's free because that's the mission, is to be inclusive. So it's mainly for students, but everybody can go. And we've done one on fake news. We've done one on, do we need to travel to be happy? So the link with, you know, the environmental impact of traveling and what it says about us when we only do selfies and we don't really enjoy actually the sceneries, right? And the one we're doing today is about the future. You know, people looking at the future with fear or with technology, etc. So it's how you project yourself in the future says a lot about us as a society, right? So this is also, I think, a very powerful way to, again, touch people about sustainability in different manners.
Yeah. I mean, while we are starting off in a different way than everything is scripted, I really, you talk about Change Now, you talk about art, what you do in your gallery, but, you know, there's Janina Rosita, and she is doing the art now since the second year for Change Now. And I just love how she depicts the whales and the animals and this whole totem pole, they call it, like the logo where everybody's doing the selfies. It's really cool how you bring art and culture into the show. And then I had the pleasure to just kind of on Saturday, I think, have a bike ride, you know, around. I went to Notre Dame and around the Seine, and how this sort of 15-minute city, at least for us, if you are just there for a day or two, you know, can take the bike. You really have priority. If you live in Paris, it's probably a big change. How do you feel about that? How does Paris change for you under the new mayor, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's been a lot of difficulties, right, in this change of taking the cars out and making all these places for pedestrian and bicycles. But all the data that are coming are super positive in terms of health, right, in terms of pollution. So I think this is very important for people, even if you don't relate to climate. I think the health of the population is something that really touches the Parisian. The other thing is also the fact that they use a lot of the rivers to do a lot of education around climate. So all the climate plan of Paris has been shown along the riverbank so that people can relate concretely what it means that we have all these cars being left out of the city. So I think it takes time, of course, and it's been very tricky for sure for a lot of people. And I think the issue is also for the people that are in the suburban, because the Parisian, a lot of them, they have a lot of infrastructure they can enjoy, right? But when you have to work, you are living outside of Paris, far away, and you have to work in Paris, then this is much more difficult. And here you touch the issue of social transition, which I think we have so underestimated, right? So we really think about doing decarbonization, etc. It's good. So people will like it because it's good, right? That's what we need to do. But the fact that we don't bring people along means that they have this really defensive positioning because we don't give them the tools to do their transition themselves. So I like this expression in French. In France, we'd say, when you can do the transition, you do the transition. And this is the inverse of what you think first, you know, that because the issue is empowerment. We need to make sure that people have the means. So we need more transport from the Paris to the suburban. We need maybe free transport. I mean, there are so many things we have to rethink that are outside of Paris in a way. And that's probably what is still upcoming in order to make it a success.
So speaking of success, let's talk about you and, and your role at EDF. Maybe you can introduce us to the company first. What is the setup? What's the scope of a global reach or European reach?
Yes, so EDF is the French electricity company. It's a state-owned company. We used to be listed, and now we're not anymore. But it's a very critical company in the sense that we have almost 200,000 employees. We are in like 54 countries. And the biggest element that describes us is the fact that we are the largest producer of electricity in the world without direct CO2 emissions. This is something that makes us, of course, very proud, but it's a huge responsibility as well, right? Because we have to keep being there to decarbonize the economy. And unfortunately, right now, we're not there. I mean, unfortunately, you look at the statistics and we're still having this kind of 80% fossil fuel, right, in the primary energy consumption. So we need to fight the right fight. And I think that has been my biggest frustration in my job at EDF, is that a lot of people fight nuclear against renewable. And we're like, guys, this is not what we need to fight. Let's fight the right fight. The fight is fossil fuel. Get rid of fossil fuel. The more we fight between technology that are carbon neutral, the more the fossil fuel are easy and doing what they are doing, which is still be there, right? So I think this is the opportunity and the frustration that I've had over the last, I would say, 5-6 years being impact officer, because we're still losing a little bit that fight. You know, we're always coming back to nuclear against renewable. And this is not what we should be looking at. We need to look at the big picture. The big picture is getting out of the fossil fuel, making sufficiency as well. It's not just about new infrastructure all the time. Let's make sure that we are sober in terms of the use of the planetary resources. And of course, electrify, baby, electrify, and not drill, baby, drill, right? That's it.
I like this, obviously, with electrification. Now, coming from Germany, you might understand that I have a different point of view, or we're different set up. And we are born and very concerned about nuclear waste and all these things. So we are trying, or let's say, I'm more in the camp of renewables. So where are you going in either renewables and or maybe new fusion reactors, which I think are always 5 years away since 20 years, and there will be maybe another 20 years for that. So, and I can understand the dilemma. You are CO2 neutral with most of your operations. And on the other hand, there is still the nuclear thing, and nuclear gets more expensive. So it's not like you can add 1 or 2 more nuclear power plants. It's not cost efficient anymore, I think. So tell us a little bit about the setup of renewables, nuclear, fusion, innovation. What's sort of the tension thing?
I think the first element to it is that we have a diverse portfolio, okay? Of course, we have nuclear. This is a very differentiating factor from EDF compared to many other companies. But our first decarbonized tool at EDF is actually hydro. That was the first element that we deployed in France was hydro, right? So we have a lot of hydro. We are one of the largest hydro developer. And of course, more recently, we've been developing wind and solar onshore and offshore. So I think this is my message is we don't have the luxury to not use what is available today, okay? Because we are late, so late, right? In terms of electrification and fighting climate change. So the first thing that we do, to be honest, is extend the life of the existing assets. That's the first thing that we should all be doing. And we've been doing that. If I think about my hydro plants, they are 80 years old, okay? And they are still young. Yeah. Because we invest a lot. We invest a lot in the maintenance. And this is also what we're doing in our nuclear station, okay? So every 10 years, the Nuclear Safety Authority looks at our station and gives us authorization to run 10 more years. The objective is to run as long as possible. Everything is new, apart from the nuclear vessel, right? But everything else, we can change it. So I think this is really what we should be all trying to do. And it's also the same towards the wind and solar. We can also try to extend the life as much as possible. We are repowering a lot of the existing wind assets, for example. So I think this is the first way to do the best investment you can do. And then on the other hand, you have to do R&D, innovation, which is exactly what you mentioned. So EDF also is a very science-based and technical company. So we have 2,000 researchers. So that's quite big, more than 600 million of budget every year in R&D. And so that's, of course, important to really work on both rupture and incremental innovation. Okay, so incremental innovation in the solar panels brings a lot of value too, right? To have more efficiency. So I think this is what we have to always do, is to work on the two extreme. So something that is super, super innovative but might take a very long time to happen, and something that is incremental but creates huge value in the short term as well. So fusion, of course, is there, but as you say, it's not something that will help us for 2050. So we have to work on the incremental innovation for 2050. And this incremental innovation, they can be higher efficiency for the solar panels. They can be with, the fact that the solar panels, they can move and they can capture more sun, etc. So doing everything we can to increase the production of the existing asset, to extend the life of the existing assets, and to make sure, again, that we have a diverse portfolio of technologies.
Maybe a side note, I don't know if you're familiar with it's called ITER, I think, the Aix-en-Provence, ITER. ITER.
Yes.
So this mega fusion global collaboration, which is like a CERN for energy, if you will. And already, I think the invention was in the, 68 or in the 60s, actually in Russia. Then the whole, USA and Russia wanted to do some peace treaty, and they said, all right, let's do this. And I think the energy concept is more or less public domain or not. It's given to the project. Canada is in, Europe
Japan.
is in, and it's in France. And it's delayed and it's very costly. But is that something that, let's say in 10 years or so, that you count that actually power from there would go to the grid, or is it in itself only a research project and stays as an island?
No, I think it's clearly ongoing and moving, but I don't think it will be a 2050 again solution. So I think it's a more long-term solution. But I think what is very interesting is that in this energy space, you have this collaboration, international collaboration. There are not that many places anymore when you have the Russian, the Japanese, etc., working together, right? So I think this is also something that we should praise, that in this COP, in this ITER, this is the capacity of people to work based on science, and not on dogma or political agenda. And I think it's something that we should praise. But again, I said, we know the technology today that will be needed for 2050, okay? But it's not because we are carbon neutral in 2050 that 2051, 2052, things are still happening, right? So we still need, of course, to work for the very long term to make sure that what we can do for 2050 stays afterwards. So I think this is always important, that we keep people doing innovation and working together, and specifically in these current days when the multilateralism is a little bit tricky.
So with all of the energy in the room, on the podcast, and in the world, we need to talk about you. So what does it mean to be Chief Impact Officer at EDF in this kind of situation, in the world we live in right now, and the tension in energy industries?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in my view, and that's why I chose EDF actually, is that energy is an essential need, right? So you know exactly why you wake up in the morning. I mean, I really have no problem waking up, even though the news are not always good, because I feel that this is such an important need. And if we think about the blackout in Spain that happened recently, right? I mean, you realize, how important electricity is, right? And how we need to make sure we are resilient. We don't know yet exactly what are the reasons. It's going to take a long time analyzing the data, etc. But this is still very important and critical, right? So energy is critical. It's a political agenda for sure, right? It's a sovereignty agenda as well. So I think what has been very important for me is to feel that I am in the right place, having the right impact. And I think for EDF, being an impact officer is in a way easy, in the sense that all our corporate mission is actually dedicated to that, right? Is to make sure that we provide the capacity of decarbonizing the economy in a social way, social just transition manner, and with the planetary boundaries in sight. So this is really the triangle. So it's a triangle of action for me. And with action comes hope. So that's why I'm hopeful, despite all this very tricky news in the morning, because I know I am in the right company, at the right place, with the right corporate mission. So this is really what is driving me every day.
So inspiring to hear you and to feel these are the right people at the right place, like you are. So kudos to you. Now, what are maybe some of the projects or initiatives that you worked on that you can describe in your role?
So I think what has been the most important factor for me is to make sure, and we discussed that at Change Now, is we are not just the sustainability department and we do our things and that's it, right? So we need to make sure that it goes everywhere, right? And it's becoming natural almost. And of course, one of the key of success could be there's no more sustainability department, right? Because everybody talks native sustainability. We're not there yet, right? But I think this has been my mission, to make sure that I go into all the gaps of the companies and people really are empowered to use sustainability as their native language, right? And to take out the alphabet soup, which is also one of the very tricky issues of sustainability, as we know. So the first thing I worked on, of course, was the top level. So the board and the executive committee. So I've been working that. The first thing I worked on was that. Then the employee level, and I was very pleased that we have one of the largest youth ecology movements inside EDF, and they are very, very, very challenging with me. I can tell you that because they are always, asking questions about are we doing the right project, the right thing, etc. So this is a very important sparring partner for me in a way. I can test things with them, and if they don't feel empowered or on board with certain things, I know that it's not going to work out with many other stakeholders, right? So I think this is a very important aspect. The unions for me are very important as well because they have been very critical as well in terms of the way people are learning new competency because we used to have a lot of coal at EDF as well, coal and fuel oil, and we closed all of them. And that has been a very important element of the unions. How do you reskill? How do you make sure that people don't feel left behind? So the unions for me are a very strong agent of change for the employees as well. So I think that has been also something I work a lot with them. And now my last element has been to identify executives that can actually go through their own process of what we call the the U-turn. So they understand what's happening, then they understand why we're there, and then they look at the solutions, right? And they become more in actions. So I have identified 16 executives. They've gone through 8 months of this strategy, and now they are writing their own roadmaps of regeneration, and that means that they will be able to bring all their teams together. So this is, for me, the way to become part of the native language of the company, get out the alphabet soup of sustainability, and have impact, not just in the sustainability department.
You touched upon the unions, and we talked about that in Paris, and that was something very particular that more or less in regards of sustainability, there was something very unusual. Can you describe how this collaboration with the union on sustainability shaped up?
I mean, it's been 20 years of sustainability collective agreement. So this is, of course, something that has some form of history, but every 5 years we renew it. So we put everybody at the table, and it's like a negotiation with unions, right? So we have to really brainstorm and agree on the commitments that we are taking towards them. And I think this is very powerful that this agreement for 2025-2030 was signed at the end of January. We were already in this ESG backlash, and the economic situation was not so good, etc. And it stayed. It was very important for the unions. And they all agree to sign it, which is super unusual that they all agree to sign a collective agreement. I think it never happened, right? 20 of them. And I think what is also interesting is that they put emphasis on things that are really at the crossroads of the transition, which is the artificial intelligence. Because this is a digital, it's a demographic, it's an environmental transition altogether, right? So you need to make sure that you really understand what it means for a group like us. And they put this chapter specifically in the collective agreement on sustainability. And they also put a specific chapter on just transition, which I think is also very important because, as I told you, we had this experience in France to close the thermal assets, but we are in 50 countries. So when you are in South Africa, in Indonesia, etc., closing coal, or in Poland, we were in Poland, we are in Poland. So this is also something that has a very different impact, of course, because it's so big in the economy that you cannot just switch off, like this. You have to really understand what is happening to people and how do you get them on board, right? So I think this union discussion is super powerful because they are very local. They really understand the culture. They understand what needs to be done so that people can really get on board. So I was super pleased that we managed to do that at a time when people were very depressed. But this was something that get us going, so it's super good.
Tell us a little bit about your background. All of that is so fascinating, and I want to deep dive in each of these things. But we're going to talk about you. So how did you start in your role? What has been your journey to where you are now?
It's interesting. I come from finance. Okay, so I started actually in an American bank, investment bank in London. So very far away, you could argue, from sustainability at the time. But what is interesting is that I started to work on the utility sector, even in the banks. I was already working on electricity, water. So I always wanted to be on this very critical sector. So I have this passion about the energy sector since a very young age, in a way. So I did the IPO of EDF from the banking side. So I've known the company for a super long time, right? And I had this opportunity. The CFO at the time of EDF, he called me up and asked me to join him. And I thought, this is the best company for me in terms of impact and transformation. So I joined from the American bank directly to EDF. And this was a huge cultural shift and challenge, right? Moving from an American investment bank to a French state-owned company, I can tell you it was like lost in translation, okay? And specifically being a woman, I'm not an engineer. So it was like really, really hard, right? So my first year was super tricky. I was wondering whether this was the right choice I had made, whether it was very tricky. But then I realized, of course, that I had so much to bring, because I knew investors, in my view, were so far away to understand at the time how critical was the issue of climate and the time it takes to change infrastructure. Okay, so taking no decision is already taking a decision. And this is, I think, something that has been really my passion, is to translate what I understand from the decision making in a company toward investors and analysts, because it works on an Excel file, but it doesn't work always in reality, right? The pace of change is so different. So the translation, which I think is one of the competency of the sustainability officer, we have to translate things from different languages, right? And I think this is my journey as well, is that I moved from this banking, very focused, very quick reaction to weak signals. I brought that, I think, to the company when I moved to EDF, which was probably much more in a long duration, slow decision making sometimes. So I was a little bit at odds, but then I think I brought that aspect. And then moving from finance to sustainability is also a way to translate different world, right? So I think that has been my hybrid. I'm a hybrid person in a way. That's the way I feel, right? Hybridation is good, in the Greek mythology, you have what we call centaur. They are half human, half horses. And that's the way I feel, I am a centaur, okay? So this is the way I want to be. I want to have this hybrid because I think it brings value. The fact that you can have different languages, different point of views. And finance and sustainability is my new journey because I am in the same team as the finance team. We are together now. And this is one of the best thing I can do today is to really make sure that we speak the same language. We all have our different culture, but at the end, we want the same thing for the company, which is value resilience in the long run. And that's the same language that we need to focus on.
Fantastic. I have a closing question. And again, I could ask a couple of more questions, but you touched upon so much. Now, the role of the CSO for our listeners, and with your background, that you are very much closer to the CFO, where do you see the role of the CSO in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm convinced that there will be more link with the CFO. I think it has to happen, right? Because this is about business. This is about shared value. And the CFO clearly has this role, right? So we need to be closer to the CFOs, whether it's being in the same team as I am, or whether it's just having a chief value officer, and the CSO can be the chief value officer tomorrow. So I think this is something that is important. But I'm really hopeful as well that the CSO become the CEOs of the future, because I think we have these competencies of understanding the strategic issues, being closer to the value exercise, I think, and operations. Because if the sustainability is not in the operation, because it's about resilience as well, then you will lose, right? If it's something just like a policy and it's not in the operation, you don't change your model, you don't change your products, then it's no use, right? So I'm hopeful that there will be more and more CSOs becoming CEOs in the future.
And I think you are a fantastic example, obviously, for that role in this journey. That was so impressive. I do have a bonus question for our listeners, because in these times we cannot, let's say, leave the studio without asking about AI.
Yes.
And AI is obviously, can be good for some, definitely will come for most of our jobs, but it's just eating up energy. I don't know if you saw the little or different quotes from Eric Schmidt, where he just says, basically in 5 years or so, this will be 99% of the existing energy. So we need to double, which means more pressure on sustainability, CO2 emissions, and so on. What's sort of the view or the first ideas about this from your point of view and within your group?
Yes, I mean, it's clearly driving a lot of the demand in the United States. As you mentioned, it's been, I think, a shocker, right? And I was at the New York Climate Week last September, and in the panel I was talking, there was only, these people, right, from Google, Meta, etc. So it was new to me as well to be in the energy panel, but actually I was the only energy company talking, right? And so, yes, it's a really, really strong change in paradigm. If you look at their CO2 emissions, they've been skyrocketing because of the development of AI, right? So there are two ways, in my view, to address it. One is we need to be really bold about asking questions about what are the use cases that are positive to solve the climate crisis. And they will be, for sure, I have no doubt, right? But we need to make sure they are there, right? And we need to really challenge the risk and benefits of using AI, right? Because for sure it will solve some of the issue. We know that for the modeling, etc., they could be very interesting for the resilience as well. So let's really push the positive use cases. But on the other hand, we need to make sure that everybody understands that we are in a limited resources world. So how do we prioritize the use case? Because if we only use AI to do things that we could do without AI, we should also be very clear about it, right? So this is education. And I think this is something that each company can do. And that's why I was very proud, as I told you, about the unions bringing AI to the table as a sustainability collective agreement, because they are asking us exactly that question. How do we prioritize the use cases so that we are a responsible company? And the last thing, which is a business for us, of course, is when the data center comes, they need connection. It's better that they are connected to a low carbon grid than to a carbon grid, right? Carbonated grid. So that's also something that we need to work on, is making sure that we work on decarbonization of the grid as a priority, so that the data center at least are not using coal or gas, but CO2-free electricity.
Carine, such a pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much. And I'm really impressed by the breadth of your knowledge, the passion, and how you, transmit the mission of your company, your group, and yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's been fascinating. Thank you.